President Zelensky has agreed on so-called Steinmeier formula, which in attempt to organize the Normandy summit in a format of 3 heads of state. This formula, it's very vague, at the same time concise. It speaks about the time when, on the conditions in which the elections on the occupied territories can take place, and in particular, when exactly the status on the special status on the Donbas can be fully adopted. That's more or less about the if the elections would be find clear and find fair by OSCE standards, but that sparked controversy in the part of the Ukrainian society. Within the last days, there were a few rallies. In particular, today there were up to 10,000 people in Kiev and some other cities around the country, in order to discuss what it all means and where we are moving, because it's indeed a breakthrough. It might be a breakthrough in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict resolution at that moment. According to some people, according to the others, there are the strong risks. So we have the panel to discuss. We have with us Mariya Ionova, who is the MP from the European Solidarity Party, formed by the former president of Poroshenko, and as well Oleksiy Matsuka, who just recently is editor-in-chief of the News of the Donbas Agency, expert on Donbas, and also has recently written a column to us on the particularly how the Steinmeier formula had been accepted by the Ukrainian society and whether it's the best response. You can also read this column on our webpage. You can follow the link on our Twitter. But before we start the discussion, so good evening, good to have you here.
Good evening.
And I would like first to start with the address of the President Zelensky. You have it in English. I know some of our foreign experts and the audience wanted to hear in particular what exactly President Zelensky said.
Dear Ukrainians, I might disappoint some of you, but there will be no betrayal, and this is why. Hear me out, please. Let's start with the main thing. Do we want the war to end and all Ukrainian territories back? Yes, we do. Currently, there's only one stage where these issues can be discussed at the highest level. It is the Normandy format meeting. Could it have taken place in the near future? No. Why? There was one barrier in the way, the greatest scare story of the past few weeks, the Steinmeier formula. Let's clarify what this formula is. Does it stipulate that Ukraine recognizes annexation of Crimea and gives up on the Donbas? No. Does it stipulate for the elections in the occupied Donbas to take place at gunpoint tomorrow? No. Why did the previous president of Ukraine announce beginning work on the implementation of this formula 3 years ago? Did he intend to betray Ukraine? This formula provides for one thing, when the so-called law on the Donbas special status should come into force. Namely, after the local elections take place there, in compliance with the Constitution of Ukraine, Ukrainian law, and after the OSCE publishes a report that states that the elections were held according to the international democratic standards. This is what we agreed to in Minsk. Did we sign any joint agreements with the so-called DPR or LPR? No. We sent a separate letter to the special representative of the OSCE, Mr. citing, wherein we affirmed agreement of the positions in the text of this formula. What's next? Elections in the Donbas tomorrow? No. Next up is a Normandy format meeting with the President of France, the German Chancellor, and the President of the Russian Federation, where we will discuss ways of ending the war in the Donbas. My position on this issue is clear and understandable, and it concurs with the position of all Ukrainians. We all understand that Donbas is Ukraine. Peace must prevail there. There must be a total ceasefire. Foreign military formations must be disengaged. We all understand that the Ukraine-Russia border on our side must be guarded by Ukrainian border patrol. An exchange of prisoners must take place so that all our citizens return home. Elections must be held not at gunpoint, but according to the Ukrainian legislation, with access for candidates from Ukrainian political forces, for Ukrainian media and international observers, with internally displaced persons having the right to exercise their right to vote. All this will be discussed at the Normandy format meeting. Will a new law on the special status of the Donbas be signed there? No. This law is in effect until December 31st, 2019. There will be a new law. Will it be swiftly drafted and approved? No. We will write it together, in cooperation and with public discussion with the entire Ukrainian society. No red lines will be crossed. Hence, no capitulation, no surrender of the national interests of Ukraine, no fixed agreements, and no global steps without the consent of the people of Ukraine. Only the return of our people and our territories, return of prisoners, and return of peace. Ahead of us, we have a long and winding road to the resolution of this problem, and we have to walk it together. And we need unity here. I respect the constitutional right of each Ukrainian to protest. I hear you, and trust me, I will never give up Ukraine. At the same time, I implore you to be level-headed and calm with regard to the situation. Don't give in to manipulations and provocations of certain people. They really want to exploit you and return the right to steal, become victims of political persecution, and avoid criminal liability. This will not happen. Everything will be Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.
Слава Україні!
So we have the guests to discuss. We probably will start with Oleksiy. In particular, you are for a while covering the Donbas war, and in particular recently, when we look to some of the op-eds in Ukraine and abroad, we see all kind of the concerns. There are different kind of words used as a capitulation and all others. But in your publication and in recent column we just seen, you're saying that there is quite a positive process and there is maybe a bit too much of the concerns. We will talk about them. We have written a lot about them, but your opinion in this a bit stands out.
You know, if we see on the situation through humanitarian dimension, of course it's positive signal for Donbas residents that our president will start build this bridge with Luhansk and Donetsk through humanitarian questions about pensions, amnesty, and other. But it's just only on the paper. We heard they propositions about that. But we see that fast and very quick steps on the political track, you know. And I think that if people in Kyiv compare this political and humanitarian tracks and see very fast they steps on that, and I see they fear that they don't know the plan, next steps of president on these questions.
I would ask Mariya, because your political force, European Solidarity, openly, especially the former President Poroshenko, today speaks very much against so-called Steinmeier formula. However, early in 2016, he was backing this proposition. We had some quotes that, in particular, that we spoke separately about the preparation for the elections and agreed at the experts level to carry on the work in preparing the selective legislation implementation of the so-called Steinmeier formula. Now he's speaking about that it was invented in the Kremlin. Can you just also explain in particular that the European Solidarity at former bloc of Petro Poroshenko, they were supporting Minsk in front of the international partners, but now it's like they're against.
No. So let's see the whole picture. First of all, Minsk Agreement. We remember in what conditions we signed Minsk Agreement 1, Minsk Agreement 2. First, it was the Ilovaisk and a big attack of Russia Federation. Second, it was Debaltseve. Regarding this formula, this track, as Oleksiy said, it's only about election. It's only about political part. And believe me, we were fighting with Formula Steinmeier, Plan Maray's plan, Formula Citing, I mean, all these years. And yes, the president was talking about this formula, but only in parallel with the security issues. So all this, provisions were every time in parallel with the security issue. That is why on the first place is security. And yes, humanitarian bloc, the step forward have been done, but we don't know still the price. And the whole issue, and Oleksiy has mentioned already about this, it's a lack of communication. It's absolutely, no clear roadmap for all this situation, because election, it's not about 6 or 8 months. I mean, it's much more longer. So we would like to see this calendar of action by President Zelensky.
But I want to mention that what the Minister of Foreign Affairs Pristaika said on his when he had a speech on the Parliament, and he said that they need 6 months for the mission in Donbas, and also what important that previously authorities they used to some kind of cunning for end war with Russia, and some category of our citizens think that Minsk agreement it is like a cunning for us, and we decide problem open conflict with that territory and with Russia. So now it's interesting, you know, that President Zelensky proposed new formula that based on the direct conversation with the people from that side, from that because they all wait from Kyiv positive and clear signal that they are part of Ukraine, and Kyiv think about that and want to do something for them.
Sorry, but
how you can explain
during
this?
all these
know?
years, we were not refusing from the people. The problem was that the humanitarian international organization, their access was blocked during all these years.
But today we heard on the street some people from around the protesters, they say that we need the wall with Donbas.
Because Zelensky has mentioned it. He told that if I am not agreed the agreement in Normand, then I will build a wall. That was also.
It is a plan C, and Pristaika mentioned it during Schuster show.
Okay, but unfortunately, what would like I say that unfortunately all this months, if I'm probably like when we are calculating, a lot of different messaging from the team of the president also. That is why people really cannot understand, I mean, the picture and the chronology of all these events. Because security, that's on the first place.
But look, then my question would be also for you in this regard. Because you said there is a complexity, but, you know, the previous government had 4 years to explain. I probably explained that maybe first 2 were too busy. But then there was always quite a lot of confusion. And if you look at the reasoning of many people today who are against, and we later would go to statistic to what extent it's representative to the society, but they are speaking like against withdrawal of the troops, against the things which are in the Minsk agreement.
And so because we hear it only from one side, not from pro-Russian and not from Russian side. We didn't have any guarantees from other side on security issue. Do we have the security issue in Stanytsia Luhanska? No. Do we have all these issues in Zolotoye or Petrovska? No. We also know that why Russians has chosen these 3 points. We know. It's strategically why they need Zolotoye and why they need Petrovska. Petrovska, it's about Mariupol. Zolotoye, it's about other things. Stanytsia Luhanska, it's about that. It's about the electric station. So we have withdrawn our military from, for example, Stanytsia Luhanska. Do we have still separatists on Gora Igor, on a high hill? Yes, we have. Do OSCE mission have the success on this strategic fire points? No.
Yeah, but we have another experience for that, and it's positive experience how release our prisoners from Moscow, and it was when Kyiv and Moscow speak directly.
So I would probably,
but I'm sorry, it was absolutely agreed with Macron and Merkel, and thankfully to Macron, this humanitarian issue was decided. But the price we still do not know.
However, I should say that probably at that point the Western partners said that they were not very much, at least to our information, they denied a huge involvement. Most probably the President Macron, of course, but I probably would bring something else because I understand that we can get in this stalemate of discussion what should come first, but there is a kind of a momentum where these things are discussed, and I want to bring the data from the Ukrainians that was made by, there is a poll made by the sociological group Rating with 2,000 respondents. We should mention that the error margin is no more than 2.2%. So it's recent, the end of September. So the question was, which solution to the Donbas problem do you support? And we see that 34% of the Ukrainians want to end hostilities and recognition of the territories as temporarily occupied and freezing the conflict. 23 granting these territories to the status of autonomy, and 23%, more or less, continuation of hostilities until full restoration of Ukrainian authority. For many, for 14%, it's difficult to answer. But generally, it looks altogether that around 60% of the Ukrainians somehow agreeing on some kind of the resolution, even if it requires some of the I don't know, some concessions. And to what, there is another question, it's to what extent do you support the Steinmeier formula as a peace settlement initiative to resolve the conflict in the Donbas? So for 60% it's difficult to answer. For altogether 18% they tend to support, and 23% tend not to support. So it's, we can say it's divisive, but in general you see that people don't really understand what
that is why it's a lack of communication, as we mentioned before.
But do you think that these kind of slogans of capitulation just fuels this lack of understanding?
You know, Natalia, today on the on Maidan, I mean, also I have read and I have seen it from my friends. Most of the people, when journalists ask them why you are here, so, and how do you suggest to solve the problem of Donbas? So one word in majority was victory, by victory. And the problem is, when you ask me also about 2016, 2017, I was in the parliament and we had Minsk platform of records there in the parliament. So every plenary, when we had people from contact groups from Minsk, every time when they return from Minsk. So we have heard from, you know, first from this person, the details, what was going on. Regarding, again, if I repeat, every time Poroshenko was telling that on first place is security, and even if we're discussing formulas or others, it was every time was parallel insecurity, and he didn't answer anything, and his contact groups also didn't sign anything, because we know, and we were thinking, and we were pressing, and we had a mutual common position with president, with parliament and government, that it's we have to make Russia to implement Minsk agreement.
But that was something which was happening, and it can last for some time. In the end, we have no
presidential elections.
Yeah,
and Putin didn't want to give any person to Poroshenko.
So,
of course,
so
for him it's much easier to solve all the problem and to freeze or to make or to still have like a Prидnestrovia through Zelensky, by Zelensky hand.
There is the result of the presidential elections, and you also mentioned about the people who were protesting. We also said about that there are maybe a particular amount of people who probably would like victory, and we have this huge majority who maybe don't know what exactly it should be, but is ready for the peaceful resolution. So what do you think, how we can shape this discussion in order not to remain in the stalemate?
You know, that I think that some people and majority who today joined for this meeting on the street in Maidan, they don't trust Zelensky, and they want to see that, you know, they like feeling that they lose their chances during these elections that we had. And people want to see something very directly decision with the Donbas. But even that 1+1 show Zelensky comments, because
1+1 is the channel owned by oligarch Igor Hromadske, who backed President Zelensky.
So Zelensky repeatedly said that they will not surrender Ukraine in any way, and few times repeated. But people don't trust on his these words.
No,
Why?
sorry
I absolutely agree with you that Office of President didn't build efficacy communication with the majority of society, but even especially with this 25% who support Poroshenko.
No. A lot of people were saying that that's the difference. A lot of people on Maidan today were saying that we were voted for Zelensky, but we do not hear the answers. Do you think, as a journalist, it's not a problem that Zelensky, after 4 months, didn't give a wide press conference?
I just would probably,
do you think it's fine?
It's a problem, of course.
Should interfere in the way, because you currently referring to the protests, we had to, we said that there were 10,000 people, there were people around the country, but we also showed the, you know, like some other popular opinion. So our question is as well, is it any disattachment in what is happening here and what are the views around the country, and there is a lack more thorough discussion among the larger population. I probably have to give a word. We earlier had chance to talk to the another member of the Servant of the People party, the head of the Committee for Foreign Relations, Bogdan Yaremenko, and that's what he explained, how he explained what the plan is so far.
It doesn't matter what the Steinmeier formula stipulates, because there is a Zelensky formula. President Zelensky is trying to bring peace, and he has clearly set out the red lines, which he would never cross in the process. Albeit he does want to bring peace. In order to bring peace, one has to talk with Putin, because he is the only reason there is an ongoing war in our country. President Zelensky wants to hold the Normandy 4 summit, because for us, it is the most palatable form of dialogue with Putin, I mean with international mediation. And Russia, as a party that can dictate its terms because its military is in our territories, and its military is killing our soldiers, set one of the preconditions for holding a Normandy 4 summit, namely, approval of the mechanism, the way the law and the special status of certain districts of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions during the peace settlement process will be implemented. As a matter of fact, using the words, or even a written letter from our representative to the Trilateral Contact Group, we informed the OSCE that we are okay with the mechanism previously discussed by the advisors to the heads of states of the Normandy 4.
So there is, at this moment, there is this discussion that there is no clarity. Maybe I can ask you two just very simple questions. Why you would use, or you think, do you support the idea to use the word capitulation? Is in the public discourse regarding particularly this formula, which quite an emotional? And the second, what exactly is something your major concern? If to be very precise, because you know,
I will quote, for example, Bogdan Yaremenko, who mentioned from Tribune in the Verkhovna Rada that we have agreed on Russian propositions, that Russia will bring peace, and the last his statement that we will consider and we will decide, for example, we will discuss the law on self-governance in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, we will agree this draft bill was Russian. So for me, of course, it's a question. And it's not only for me. That is why, about capitulation, it means that we really do not know if this election will be when the border, Russian-Ukraine and Ukrainian border will be closed, or will be by control, or not, or after. We don't know. Also, Zelensky and his team is talking about new draft law. We don't know this draft law. We even do not know the details. Why? I mean, for example, in our draft law, which is still, I mean, we have involved our political agreement from Minsk agreement, because this law of self-governance is still active till the end of the year. And it is absolutely clear condition on election and when this election could be.
So can I clarify? So yes. you against, because you just against, because I'm a bit confused, because you don't know what's there, but it's up to the parliament then discuss.
I'm not against Ukraine. I'm against
no. I mean, like,
to agree all the proposition and the draft bills with Russia Federation. Why Ukrainian parliament has to agree any draft law with Russia Federation? May I ask you?
But there was, you don't ask me, there is the answer.
Anyone
there was a recent answer, or there is a recent answer of Bogdan Yaremenko there. My question is to you, What do you think should be the question? Because what it feels today is that there is quite a cloud regarding the general idea of whether the whole negotiation should take place. There is something we're discussing, but what should be the question you think the journalists, the analysts should be asked in order we move forward?
I think the most important question, how they do this, if process going on, so what next steps we will see. It's amnesty, it's election, how they can do this election, and the main question, who controls the border? Because if election process start with Russians inside, it's very dangerous for our democracy, of course. But what the arguments they have for Putin to agree during Normandy this month that he will agree with the logical of Ukrainians that Russia should go out from Donbas region. And we don't know in reality this. But also I want to remember the situation when there is majority on the parliament, also civic society, we don't know about the draft of this law that Rada adopted during...
You mean the previous law?
Yes, previously.
I'm
so
sorry,
now,
that was all together with the Ivazovska ask. I mean, that was
okay,
all
maybe
together with the
Ivazovska,
expert.
But big
No,
society, we don't know about this draft. And especially people from Donbas, they didn't involve in this process. Maybe Ivazovska, you spoke about that, but with the average people from that side. No.
Olga Ivazovska is the representative of the Opora organization, which is a watchdog on the elections, and was also represented.
Anyway, this process, what we name peacemaking, peace building, it's always very high process. And we need to know
Oleksiy,
it.
what people now are saying in Zolotoye, Lugansk and Petrovska, what are they asking?
It's different voices. We know it because we film in
No,
them.
for example, in Zolotoye there is 529 families.
Some people fear that Russians will come
Yes.
if we stop
Because
our
it's
control.
no guarantee again.
Yes, it's absolutely no guarantee.
From other
but
side.
It's open conflict. We don't have guarantee in any questions now.
So,
unfortunately.
No. Zelensky is saying that it's his guarantees.
Okay, we will see it in Normandy, in Paris, in
But
middle
so
October.
everything what he is doing now, it's just to have Normand. So we hope that if they will not agree in Normand, there will not be any election and other steps. Yes.
you hope that nothing happens.
No. I hope, but telling the truth, when we are already in formula or in electional point, why Russians has to be interesting to discuss security issue, especially when already our international partners not very on Ukrainian side.
I don't have answer on this because I'm not politician, but I see on the situation through my journalism view, and we can estimate your position, other political fractions and others, but I know what people want in the field, in the Donbas region. They all want peace. Yes, of course.
But
and
peace
Zelensky
by price,
promised
by
it.
any price.
But the peace by any price is kind of a phrase, and I guess we are, serious enough not to speak about
security.
metaphors,
Again,
but about
security.
And not only security, humanitarian questions also. And for people there, it is #1 questions, humanitarian, because it's money, it's food, it's logistical
but it's also
questions
responsibility not only Ukraine, but it's also,
and we have
our
positive example in Stanytsia with the bridge, and now Ukrainian government built this bridge.
But with the propositions and on that conditions which Russian wanted.
But the
the
bridge
weeds is like tank will go. We were against the weeds of this bridge
so
for
better
tanks.
without bridge.
Now this bridge is the weeds. I mean the weeds is like tank can go.
Do you see that in the conflict resolution there are sometimes the particular concessions in order to gain humanitarian security?
Again, we are absolutely in favor, but the details, I think that you as a journalist are not also satisfied that you don't have enough information. It's the same
We
for
don't
us.
have access
We don't
even
have
for the occupied area, and the same situation in Kyiv.
But it's whose guilt? Ukrainian government
course
and
not.
president? No, Russians. So we have to at least to hear from them something. We don't hear from them anything on security, on election, on other.
So Obviously, we won't solve or find any agreement within like one program an hour, because I just should probably explain to our audience that it's probably the start of the very serious and tough and difficult discussions we will go on in this studio if the process is moving. It can stuck at any point if the Normandy meeting happens or not. But I'm thanking you for the discussion. It probably represents the part of the discussion we have here. It could be definitely broader.
No, we have the common issue. The common issue is that it's not enough information and a lack of communication.
Some people would probably not agree, because you said, like, we had the address of the president, we had the explanation. Sometimes some things are clear, some things are obviously explained many times.
The devil is into details.
Obviously, but that's what we understand there in
And we try to know these details during this program.
Yeah, but I probably would say there is a general, of course, bigger concern of the Ukrainian society, that there is zero trust to Russia, disregarding what the agreement would be, that little people can trust Russia, and therefore it creates such an emotional so many emotions. At the same time, of course, from the Western partners, it's hard to understand what is a guarantee that Russia would fulfill their obligation. I guess that's something we can agree what is in the core of the debate.